Hello again and welcome to our final panel discussion for today, the changing face of the health and safety workplace. We have a very strong international perspective. Our panel, I'm just going to introduce them, they'll come up to the stage and we'll get started. Rick Pollock, who's president of ASSE, American Society of Safety Engineers. Andrew Cooper, who's president of CSSE, the Canadian Society of Safety Engineering. And Sue Pilkington, chair of the Safety Institute of Australia. And Sue has elected for a stick mic, so if things go wrong, she may sing selections of... I may well end up doing that, actually. Just the format's fairly relaxed. Just want to talk a little bit, maybe each of you could introduce yourselves, say a little bit about how you see things from your perspective. Then I'll ask a few questions. I'll throw it off over to Rick.
Well, first of all, welcome everyone. Glad to see people are here as we near the end of the day. That shows a good group of professionals wanting to learn all the way through the day. It's terrific. It's my honor to be here, and I bring greetings from ASSE in the United States. We're having the same kind of problems you are, I believe, in our profession. Our profession's aging, and it's aging rapidly, and we have a major issue facing us of trying to get youth to enter the profession, to go through the proper education process, making sure that we're able to carry out our duties to the best of our ability. And we have initiatives that we've begun recently. We have an inter-society meeting in 2 weeks in Chicago where we have a number of different the industrial hygiene group, the medical groups, environmental groups getting together, talking about the common problems, and this is center stage for our discussion. All professional organizations are having that. So we're really looking at that, along with a number of other things, trying to do a collective program with our OSHA, like your health safety executive, reaching out to small business and making sure that we are making ourselves available to them, dealing with their major issues facing them. So with that.
Great comments, Rick. Welcome from Canada's Safety, Health and Environmental Practitioners. It's wonderful to be here. This is a little bit of coming home for me again. And it really is, it's an aging profession, but it's a changing profession because the world continues to change, and we need to change along with it. We have such a tremendous opportunity to impact workplaces, organizations, and individuals in our own countries and around the world. And if we weren't there, what would safety look like in workplaces? So important work that we do, and we're really pleased to be here with Rick from ASSE and Sue from SIA.
Sue.
I feel like I should say g'day, hey?
We'd be disappointed if you didn't, to be honest.
Indeed. I really would like to convey the thoughts of your colleagues in Australia, and let me say also I'm delighted to be here with you again. Big challenges in Australia really lie around things like certification of generalist OHS practitioners, that is codifying what constitutes a competent professional in workplaces in Australia, which in itself is not the big hurdle. I think the big hurdle then is to sell that message to the people who are buying our services within marketplaces. Employers perhaps aren't readily able to discern what constitutes a competent practitioner versus someone who may not quite fit the mould that we as professionals would expect. So we've got quite a lot of work going on in front of us on that front, and we see that IOSH is about to publish some research that's been undertaken in Europe. That's consuming our time, and again, the changing face of work and the changing face of workplaces presents, I think, challenges but great opportunity for us as practitioners, and we should all be looking to embrace the opportunity in front of us to broaden our capability.
Thank you. Just one big topic to kick off with, and it may apply more to you two than Australia, because Australia's economy, if I read the figures right, is doing a lot better than some of us. But I mean, have you noticed within your economy, which has very similar problems to ours, less focus on it? They kind of we need to cut something, we need not to think about that, we just need to get through the next 6 months of the next year, we don't need to think in the long term. Have you noticed that kind of short-termism or not?
With the Obama administration being more pro-labor, I think that OSHA is continuing to move forward with an agenda that is focused on improving safety and health regulation and even expanding in some areas that have been lagging for many, many years. I think on the other side of it, you look at the discussion similar to the one that a couple that we had earlier today that I chaired, dealing with this view of health and safety being negative for business. And it's in many ways in our country, it's misinformation that's spun through political means, and it gets in our way. It really does. I don't think from our standpoint that we're letting it bother us. It's full steam ahead. We're continuing to get our message out. We have a good chapter network, and we have 18 what are called practice specialties that have focused groups practicing in, let's say, construction or healthcare or training and education, our new one, that are trying to get their message out. And we're trying to get deeper into the business network so that we're understood more as an asset to business rather than a liability.
Sue, I did say Australia's economy has been doing quite well compared to the rest of us, but do you echo some of that problem? I mean, we read it in our press, the health and safety culture, which is a burden, and that's it. I mean, how do you counter that perception?
Well, I think in Australia, it'd be fair to say that I think it's an enlightened attitude towards health and safety and the value it brings to a business. That good health and safety organisations that can demonstrate that they practice good health and safety have a point of differentiation from their competitors, and people really leverage that sort of thing. And we were talking just yesterday, I think, about corporate social responsibility and how organisations use that sort of data to, again, leverage their position in the market. Health and safety is seen, good health and safety management is seen as being a distinct advantage. People don't kick back in Australia around health and safety. It's an accepted part of doing business in Australia, and health and safety is a vital part of doing business.
I just wanted to listen to Subhash earlier. He was saying, he talks about risk management. In fact, do you think that a bit of rebranding helps, or do you think think things are going fine as they are?
Look, I do perceive a difference between how health and safety is perceived here and how it is in Australia, and even listening to speakers today, I'm struck by how some practices reflect perhaps what we were doing 5 years ago, I would think. So, which is why I think we have a rather enlightened attitude to health and safety. That's all.
Yeah, Andrew, where does Canada fit in this?
Well, it varies from region to region, but we are very tied to the U.S. economy. And we have moved due to some key indicators in terms of our Canadian dollar is now pretty much on par with the U.S. dollar, which has impacted significantly our manufacturing center, predominantly in central Canada. So as a result, you see some impact in terms of the sustainability of those organizations and their health and safety programs. So they have some impacts in order to be able to be successful as health and safety professionals there. We do see a shift in terms of a resource and energy economy, specifically out west, and also out in the eastern areas of Canada as well. And those economies are doing very well. We have some issues in terms of our ability to transport some of our energy into our major customers, and that's starting to cause a slowdown in our economy. But in terms of the impact in health and safety in that energy sector, it really isn't driven by regulators. It's driven by the top players in that market. And they really drive down through their contractor and supply chain in terms of what their requirements are. And they set very high standards. And then that trickles down throughout our safety economy in Western Canada.
Right, and when you were talking about the drive from central government, because it was something we touched on this morning. We had the employment spokesman for the opposition this morning. He was saying he fears things will get worse, which of course politicians tend to say about the other guy. But he's obviously welcome to his opinion. But I just wondered whether you felt that helped you. In other words, the attitude of the Obama administration was pushing one way, whereas the attitude from business feeling the pinch because of the difficult economy is perhaps pushing you the other.
It's really hard to say. I mean, what we're trying to do at ASSE is really what we do as a profession anyway, and that's begin to educate business that safety and health, good safety and health, is about bottom line performance. It's a risk-based approach. It's understanding what your risk reward is, and we're trying to move more to what's considered an enterprise risk management view. So if you're talking with business people, you're talking about business return on investment. Whether it's investment in your people and their health and safety, or it's investment in plant and equipment, or supply chain issues that we're talking about, it's all about risk and reward, and getting people to understand that dollars spent, we know it. There's been enough research done that shows dollars spent on health and safety, whether it's on the people, the education, the infrastructure, pay back. We heard the numbers this morning.
Right. Right, so it adds up. I want to throw it open as quickly as I can to questions. I just want to pursue one thing Sue raised. I mean, when you talked about where you were 5 years ago and where you are now, what do you think are the big changes that we could all learn from here in the past 4 or 5 years that you think? I mean, has there been any watershed moment? Has there been any big thing that you really think we should take home with us?
I think it's been a move towards a more centralised strategic direction around health and safety. We have Australia, as you may know, has got multiple jurisdictions, but there is a centralised body in Canberra called Safe Work Australia, which drives the national strategy and informs the activities within jurisdictions. I think having that cohesive sort of direction articulated from on high, as it were, really is quite useful. We all understand where we are and we're all on the same page. We understand where the key exposures are within the country around health and safety, and we're all working collaboratively towards addressing that. I'm not quite sure what it is that I'm seeing here that's different, except that, and it sounds trite to say, but it's almost an attitudinal thing, for the want of a better way of describing it. That health and safety is truly embraced as something important in Australia, and maybe that's a societal thing. People regard it as being important, that it's not appropriate for people to be killed in workplaces, killed and maimed in workplaces, and people stamp their feet about it.
Right. Very interesting. Let's throw it open to the floor, because there's lots of issues, big issues that have been raised by that. Let's have some questions, and let's have also, by the way, you can do the questions by text. As before, IOSH, and it's 80010. Who'd like to be first? Yes, sir. Can we get a microphone down to the front? Can we get a microphone?
So give him your mic. Give him your mic.
I tell you what, if you shout out, I will relay the question. Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, fantastic.
Jason Leonard from AECOM. Actually, it was just to follow up with Sue. What do you think it would take in terms of society to change that attitude? We see sort of the Daily Mail and Daily Express, and talk about health and safety. What do you think would change, or what have you seen over the last 5 years? Perhaps that's changed.
I think perhaps you've got to make more transparent what really goes on in workplaces. You've got to talk about how many people get killed in workplaces every year, and I think translate that into how many that is a day, and how many people are maimed in workplaces, and what cost that is to the GDP in the country. And I think until you can make things real by putting it in the same sort of language that people talk about financial matters and other things, something that's tangible, perhaps people just can't quite get their head around how big a problem this is.
But the strange thing is here, I don't know if you have the same problem where you are, that people quote to you myths. I mean, they quote stories, and you try and check who is the kid that wasn't allowed to play a particular game because it was going to put his eye out by a head teacher who, and the answer is, we can't find them. If you check it, it's not there. So what do you do about that?
You talk about myths. One of the things that I've been trying to do with other professionals in the U.S. is get people to understand human error. We have been so focused on the process of behavior-based safety, which focuses on the employee as the problem and their behavior as the problem, and they own and choose their behavior, when we know from science and from experience that's not the case. Yes, we all are responsible, yes, no doubt about that, but we don't do much on human error. And human error really is about the design of the work, the design of the process, and our responsibility in management to maintain the integrity of that design. And I think that the more that we as a profession in the U.S. begin to move that direction, we may come closer to where the Australians are, because in my world, they own that book. They've done a really good job with it.
In terms of myths, I think you're right. There are a lot of untruths, a lot of unknown facts that are out there, and it really is our responsibility to gather those facts and share them so that we have a common understanding. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was working for a large supplier of safety equipment, and at a session with one of our regulators, and they're handing out information about Purell, and I apologize for using someone's brand name, and how it could be flammable. Mm-hmm. And it was quite interesting because the regulator, the health and safety regulator, was providing this information, And it was an urban myth. There were no documented cases. If you started to explore it by doing a little bit of research on the internet, you would quickly find out that someone had taken a picture from one instance, one situation, a different type of workplace, applied it to this specific instance, and then started to market that message, which was untrue. And as a sales organization trying to sell that product, which was a good product, we had to make sure that people had the facts so they could make informed decisions.
Right. But it can be very tricky, because correcting a myth, as you know, particularly in the internet, you can
That's
check
right.
things in the internet, but they also never go away.
That's right.
It's probably there somewhere. Let's have some more thoughts from the floor. We have got some microphones now. I think I saw somebody come in carrying them. Yes, there's one right at the back. Any more? I feel like an auctioneer about to sell off something. Any more? Last bit? There's one there, and there's a couple down there. Yes. It's the last session of the evening. People have on their minds the health and safety of going to the pub, I suspect. And we two over there, and then one in there.
Hi, Keith Baldock. I currently work for News International, but in a prior life, I worked for 25 years for a global food company who were aligned with General Mills in America. Having visited one or two of the factories in the States, just Richard's view really on the differences between the UK and the USA. Because in the UK, we basically had the same machinery which is built in Cincinnati and Minneapolis. We had the same machinery, but in the UK, we would cover it with fixed guards, light guards, safe systems of work, etc., etc. The same machinery in the United States had a little sticker on it saying finger trap. And yet they had a lot lower accident rates than we had. So is the culture better in America that you tell somebody that it's dangerous and they keep away? Or are we just becoming a nanny state in the UK?
Well, you probably know my friend Gary Olmsted then. You know, General Mills, to begin with, is an excellent company. In the U.S., they've been rated as one of the top 10 employers or top 20 employers to work for a number of reasons. And I think in the United States, they have a culture that is quite understanding of the human being, of their issues, et cetera. I thought maybe you were going to go the other direction, because usually I get a question like that, and we're so much better than you are. But so I was glad to hear that.
I can do that.
Sure, yeah. So I think right off the top of my head, because I know General Mills and I know what goes on in the U.S., they have very good training. They have management that's involved and understands the importance of not only safety, but in the food industry, food safety, good manufacturing practices, and the like, which I'm sure you have here. And other than that, I don't really know. I couldn't. That's one anecdote that I couldn't comment on beyond that.
I suppose the big picture here is that workers are not irrational beings. They don't want to go home with an injury. They want to go home and be safe. So the question is to make sure that they're part of your team and part of your thinking, rather than have it done to them. Done with them.
Worker engagement, you see it obviously here in the UK and in Europe in terms of joint health and safety committees, for example, are really ingrained. Participation is really ingrained in the Canadian safety psyche. And it's something that really does bring the opportunity for workers to come together with managers to recognize, to identify, to assess, to discuss, to solve health and safety problems in the workplace. It's been very, very successful.
But do you find, Sue, I mean, you talked about a different culture there. Do you also find, to go back to the questioner's point, which is, it's not just that small businesses can find this onerous, individual workers can find it a bit silly. And if they think it's a bit silly, they opt out, or they subvert it, or they just don't do it.
I can appreciate that position. I don't want to bore anyone. I've got some fairly firm views about safe places of work, safe systems of work, and behaviour / culture stuff in workplaces. None substitutes for any of the others. One of them's missing, the whole thing's going to fall over. So, you know, I'm a great advocate of you can't rely on someone's good behaviour to make a hazard safe. You must make the workplace safe. You complement it with safe systems, and you complement it with a good cultural engagement type program.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Where did the other microphones go? Yes, there's a couple over there. Yes, ma'am. Is it switched on? All right, we've got... Perhaps plug it in or something, I don't know.
I was just going to ask,
There we go.
given the long history of everybody working to improve conditions for the workforce, in each of your respective countries, what do you think that has happened, the more significant event that have changed the public support for health and safety?
That's an interesting question. Sue?
That is an interesting question. Can I have 5 minutes thinking time? I'll pass. Come back to me. I need to
everybody's
think.
passing the ball. I mean,
You know, I see it happening right now in different places recently where I let people know what I do or the like. You know, the recent fires in Bangladesh, you know, we had in the States just in the last 15 years, we had a poultry plant fire with locked doors, killing dozens. We've had grain explosion, fire explosions. You know, again, those are physically controllable situations that should have never ever happened in a million years, but they did happen. And what it does is it does raise up the focus for a while. And I hope very much, and I see it happening, that the business community is beginning to understand the sustainability issue as it relates to employees and their community beyond just the environmental aspect of normal. People think about the sustainability movement. And I know that our organizations are mutually involved in the Center for Safety and Health Sustainability, and the idea there is to try to move beyond the normal safety discussion and raise it up to a level of the board. So we're talking more about the overall corporate good and the shareholder value and stakeholder value.
But I was at a conference in which someone from DuPont was talking about the history of that very long-lived company and was saying right at the start, when we started making ammunition for the American Civil War, the key employees were put there with their families, and they recognized that if something went wrong, it went terribly badly wrong for them. Now, obviously, we don't have that today, but we do have a kind of jeopardy, don't we, as we saw with BP.
Sure.
You lose your job, you can lose your reputation, you can nearly see the whole company go down the tubes if you get it wrong. So,
That's right. I looked at two things as you were talking. One is this enterprise risk, understanding where safety and health and protection fits in the overall sustainability of the economic model of the organization. And the other is the individuals involved, and I use the term risk homeostasis. Everybody has a different, my belief is, a different perception of risk. And the better job we do of making people aware of what risk is and how it ties directly to the work that they're involved in, like living in the middle of a munitions plant. I mean, I think I wouldn't light my cigar there, would I? No. So
I think you give up smoking pretty quick anyway. Yeah, I mean, in Canada, to go back to the main part of the question. How do you see
Well, unfortunately, like in many countries, it's the tragedies that bring us together and make us realize that we need to change, we need to take action. I think of a couple of examples in Canada. Back in the mid-90s, there was a serious mine disaster in Nova Scotia where 27 miners lost their lives. They found through that process, the investigation and the legal matters after, that there wasn't force in law to allow them to hold anyone accountable because the law did not provide it. We've made a number of changes, and similar to the corporate killing laws that you see here in the UK. And they've been in place since about 2004, but we're really starting to use that law and starting to challenge specific events that have happened since. And we're still waiting to see where those cases will go and what kind of impact and accountability that they'll result in. We had another event back, I think it was 2009, 2010, Christmas Eve in Toronto. 4 migrant workers from Russia fell to their deaths from a high-rise apartment building where they were working on a swing stage doing roof repairs. And as a result, Ontario, one of our larger provinces, came together and said, we really need to investigate our health and safety systems in the province, and we need to look at what types of changes we need to institute. And they're in the process now where they've rejigged their health and safety system in terms of enforcement, communication, setting of standards, and training and education. And now they're requiring specific mandatory training for workers, for supervisors, and for others in organizations related to health and safety. So it's interesting the changes that come.
Sue?
I think in Australia it's not been so much an incident that sort of that changed the course of how health and safety was managed. I think it was just an evolutionary process has been there is a really high level of engagement with employee organisations or union organisations, employer organisations and regulators, and in fact it's part of the OHS regulatory framework in Australia that what we call our tripartite approach, employers, unions and the regulators must collaborate on health and safety. I think that in itself underpins a better approach to an approach that perhaps produces a more sustainably better outcome for us, I think.
Thank you. Was there one more question from over there? I thought I saw another hand. Yes, Sarah, if you can get the microphone.
Hello, yes. David Ball, Middlesex University. It's the end of the day, so this is a cracker. In the UK, I observe there are competing philosophies within the health and safety world. One basically says our goal is total safety, zero risk, and the other one says that's not achievable. Our goal is to do what is reasonable to promote safety. Now, these are quite different and distinct, these philosophers. I'd be really interested to hear whether you have the same debate in North America and Australia, and if so, which of these sides is on top, if one is. Thank you.
We've only got a few minutes, so you'll be pleased to know. Everybody, you can talk in tabloid headlines. Who wants to volunteer first? Nobody.
It's the two philosophies of safety first, right, and safety on the list, right? Is it a core value? Is it a priority? We had some great discussion earlier with the other international panel, and I really like the discussion around it's a core value, and it helps us drive our business in terms of the other things that are important. I think the jury is still out. The discussion is, and the debate is still going on, and it is quite heated, depending upon who you're talking about. But the one thing that I know about health and safety practitioners in this country, in Canada, the US, and Australia, and around the world, is we're really passionate about what we believe in and what we do.
Right. And even though these are two clearly different philosophies, they are moving in the same direction.
That's right. You know, I think that the bottom line is that a worker fatality, a worker injury, coming home differently or not at all than when you left earlier in the day is completely unacceptable. So whether it's a goal for zero or it's another goal that we're going to work as expeditiously and as capably as we can given the resources we have, I personally don't care, because at the end of the day we want to bring them all home. That's what we want to do.
Sue?
I think the zero harm argument is an interesting one. It's an aspirational goal, I think, for organisations that have mature safety management systems, and I think it's all right for those organisations to articulate that aspiration. For most other organisations, I think people would consider zero harm is unattainable. Because they think it's unattainable, then there's no buy-in to the concept. I'm with Rick. I'm around providing and maintaining safe places and safe systems of work, and I think that is the fundamental requirement.
A couple of quick questions before we have to bring the session to an end. Very specific. What are the hot sectors for employment for HS practitioners? And I don't know whether somebody's looking forward to going to Australia, perhaps. And any emerging sectors where you feel HS needs to be engaged. What are your thoughts?
We're a little bit like central, the central Western Canada, where nobody in their right mind would want to live in North Dakota, but it's a boom town. And so oil and gas is one sector that's really booming. Our food sector continues strong, so food distribution, those categories are strong. Construction has picked back up in the United States. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're headed in the right direction in a number of areas. Our manufacturing continues to lag a little bit better. But I think right now oil and gas is probably the leader.
Yeah, and I'd say oil and gas and heavy construction.
Yeah.
How about Australia?
Mining and resources, and in fact health and safety practitioners, the job health and safety practitioner is on the skilled migration list, not that I'm encouraging anyone to come, but it surprises me. We do not have enough practitioners to fill the need in that sector.
Right. And it is February in England. You may like to think about that. That's all I'm going to say. It's not North Dakota. Look, one of the reasons why these sessions work so well is sharing expertise and also having the opportunity to network. So thank you very much. Thank you to our distinguished guests. Thank you.